Hi everyone, Tiffany Elder here with Only God Stories, bringing you 2 key items that you want to know before this episode. Now, the first is that we want to highlight that this episode really focuses on Hawaii. Now, this episode was filmed several weeks before the tragic fires in Maui, but in true Only God Story fashion, we believe that the timing of this is no accident. So we want to take this opportunity to promote the relief work from 2 different organizations. The first is a local church to Maui called Hope Chapel Maui. The second is a larger organization called Convoy of Hope. Now, we're going to have links to both of these organizations, this church and organization, both in our show notes and linked in our website. Now, our prayers and support are with the people of Maui during this incredibly challenging time. Now, the second key item that you need to know before today's episode is that our oldest son, Jackson, is today's guest. And the day after this episode airs is his 9th birthday. So be sure to give him a shout out, comments on social media or wherever you're listening. Wish him a happy birthday and support him. Our hope for this episode is to show you an example of how we use both the good and the bad moments in our lives to instill the faith in our children that only God stories still happen today. This just happens to be one of the good, more fun stories that we're going to be sharing. We hope that you enjoyed today's episode and that you leave encouraged and inspired to reminisce on your own Only God stories in your family and specifically with your children, if you have them. Welcome to the Only God Stories podcast, where we believe testimonies are powerful. In this podcast, your faith will be built as we hear from people from all walks of life who recognize the power of God in their lives. To hear more testimonies or for the opportunity to share a story of your own, check us out on our website at onlygodstories.org.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Only God Stories podcast. Man, it is a special day today, and we get a chance to be able to have what's going to be my favorite guest on this podcast. But first, I've got to say, hey, my name is Joseph, joined with my wife, Tiffany, and we're going to be jumping off with my favorite guest. Once again, we have our son, Jackson Elder, who's going to be joining us, and he is almost 9 years old. And what I love about Jackson is that he is an includer. He is creative by nature. He is very sharp, but he also wants to be able to love on people and show them how important they are. So, Jackson, welcome to the podcast. He's glad to be here. Hey, what I want to do is I want to get started by just asking Jackson a couple of questions before we jump in. And so, Jackson, I just want to ask you out of the gate, can you tell me or define what is an Only God story?
It's like a story that can only happen with God, and it's just like a godly story that happened with people.
So good, Jackson. And why do you think that only God stories are important in our family? Like, why is it important for us as a family to remember our only God stories? Can you tell me that?
So we can remember the hard times, and and how God fixed those hard times.
That's good, Jackson. So he turned it into a story that focuses on him and brings glory to him. That's excellent. Now I got to ask, what was your favorite Only God story so far?
Our Hawaii Only God story, how we got to go to Hawaii.
Oh man. Hey, let me just preface this for everybody. Not all of our stories are in Hawaii, as in there's only one. But we have a lot of Only God stories, and this one's a fun one for us. But man, some of our Only God stories have been really, really hard. And I'd say the hardest one for us was when we lost a baby. It was right after Jackson was born. He was born, and ended up turning into an Only God story. And we can save that for another day. But I would say Jackson, Hawaii was our favorite one, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yep. So let me just ask, how did this one start? Tell us about it.
Well, we went to the airport. We had a 12-hour delay, and our flight got canceled. So they gave us like enough money so we could go to Hawaii.
Yeah, and we're going to visit some friends in California, right?
Yeah.
And I just have to say, like, this was one important detail you left out. This was Christmas Day.
Christmas Day.
This was Christmas Day, and it was I think actually 11-hour delay. So we get there in the morning and we are there all day, Christmas Day, 3 little kiddos running around to the airport. And to say it was a little miserable would be fair. It was a little crazy. We made the best of it. But whenever we finally got that it's canceled notice from the gate agent, Jackson, how did that make you feel?
I cried for like hours.
I did cry for hours. Do you remember what Mommy told you?
It's okay to be sad, but it's not okay to be mad.
Yeah, it's okay to be sad. It's not okay to be mad about it. Because we were on our way to see your best friends on Christmas Day. I mean, that would make anybody sad. What, Jackson? Bestest friends.
Bestest friends. Okay.
Bestest friends. There you go. Shout out Brooks and Palmer. Bestest friends. So it was sad, but we said it's okay to be sad. It's not okay to be mad about it. Because also, we try to take those things in stride. We all have hard times. And I also said things happen for a reason. And not all the time do something bad turn to good. Like that doesn't happen each time. But this was a pretty crazy story. So I'll back up and give everybody some details on what went down. So we're there Christmas Day. And if you remember Christmas Day, this is when Southwest Airlines had their big debacle and everything was canceled. Like thousands of flights were canceled. And it was just crazy. We were at the airport. Our youngest was 16 months old. Crazy day. And once we got that call that our delay turned into a cancellation, we stayed in line at the airport to get a refund. And by standing in line, we actually got some vouchers. So they gave us vouchers, like extra cash to be used for flights per person. And then a few days later, Southwest is really trying to make amends for everybody, and they give out a ton of points.
They knew they messed it up.
They knew they messed up. They give out a ton of points to everybody. So now we got our full refund. We have vouchers, and we have so many points we don't know what to do with. So at this point, I'm thinking to myself, man, we actually have enough points. We could actually go to Hawaii for the first time in our lives if we wanted to. Planning's, my mind is spinning. Yeah. And so I just start looking up hotels. And this would be in like the low season. So not peak, but it would be the low season. So everything's cheaper. And I start looking at what would it take to go to Hawaii and stay at a hotel for a few days. So I'm looking at the hotel rates and things like that. So I have a number because I'm looking at a specific week during the low season when theoretically we could afford the tickets for these days. So what would the hotel look like? So I have this number in my mind. We talk about it. And the week that we are even considering it, like we haven't made a decision. We don't know where we're going at this point. We're just considering it. We get a letter in the mail. Probably the best letter in the mail I've ever received. I've
gotten a better letter before.
So we had moved that past year. We moved into our house, and it was a new construction.
Which is another Only God story.
Oh, totally another. Yeah. Yes, another God story.
In 5 days. We'll just leave
7 business days. Yeah, it was pretty nuts. But it was a new construction home, and our escrow account. Oh my goodness. For those who can't see the screen, if you're listening to podcasts on Apple or Spotify, our son just gave us they're crazy look, which is probably true. Anyway, so we get a refund check from our escrow account for basically the tax year that we pre-funded to pay taxes for, but our house didn't exist. So we get this refund check. And Joseph, do you remember how that lined up, the amount-wise?
I think it was within like $100, I think, of what the hotel cost was versus the check. I mean, it was almost to the dollar. Like it was super, super close.
Yes, it was $100 over what it would cost to stay at a hotel. And then I'm just thinking, let's get really crazy. How much would it take to bring family along? And so we ended up being able to bring family on the vouchers and points and have our hotel paid for by this money we had no idea was coming our way. Granted, it was our money that we're getting back, but still, it felt kind of like a bonus.
Your taxes at the end of the year. The government's just giving you what was yours.
Yeah, but doing your taxes and you miscalculated all year in favor of the government and then them giving you money back. Yeah, and you didn't know it was going to happen. So it was an incredible story of how we made it to Hawaii. And Jackson, what I loved probably most about our Hawaii trip is that you actually had your own mini Only God story. So can you tell us what was the one thing that you wanted to try?
The only thing.
The only thing you wanted to try. You told us like 10 times on the way to Hawaii. What's the one thing you wanted to try?
A coconut.
A coconut.
Coconut.
And what happened when we got to the resort? We found out that there were no coconuts.
Only pineapple.
Yes, they only had pineapple drinks. So we get to this resort, and there are no coconuts. There are only pineapple drinks. But Jackson, Daddy, do you remember what we saw on our final full day in Hawaii?
I see one random lady walking around with a coconut, and I'm going, where did that come from? And so, of course, we asked her, and she said, hey, there's a landscaping crew like around that corner, around the bend, kind of very general, vague direction, and they're cutting them down and they're handing them out for free.
Free coconuts.
Free coconuts. Wow. So I take off. Go ahead.
No, I'm just thinking. I was just still like, I'm still amazed that first of all that happened, that we saw this lady, that they were free, because nothing's free in Hawaii. I don't know if you've been to Hawaii. We never thought we'd go to Hawaii, but nothing's free in Hawaii. And
they make everything a little bit extra.
They do.
I take off on a dead sprint because I'm like, my son's wanted this the whole time. Like, if they run out, I'm going to be disappointed. So I'm in sand-filled chacos running a few hundred yards to be able to get to said coconuts. And eventually I got there. They're cutting some down and people were grabbing them by the handfuls. But we got a few for our family to be able to try.
So we ended up with 3, like you said, a few that we ended up getting to try. Jackson, can you answer me this? Did you like your coconut?
Not at all.
No. He did not like it at all.
I also really wanted to see a sea urchin.
You're right.
Yeah. Dad went out, explored, and we found a sea urchin.
Yeah.
There was a petting zoo. Sea urchin, bad idea. It was in there, but so.
Hey, Jackson, do you remember one of the things that Daddy wanted to see when we were there?
The
what's that?
Hawaiian monk seal.
The Hawaiian monk seal.
We saw it. We went to the scene. We passed by some locals, and we were just like they've been there before. There was like private event sign, so
So we may have up past that.
or while this
Trespass.
in there while the sign was there, so we know we can trust you. We never met him before, but we trust them. And they brought us to a secret beach. There were crabs,
It looked called the secret beach.
and me and my mom saw like a splash in the water. It was the Hawaiian monk seal.
Yeah, oh my goodness, yes it was.
And also, I had a souvenir crab.
Oh, crab leg, like a little pincher.
Yeah.
I do remember that. Yeah, it was super cool. I remember, son, we were all standing there, and all of a sudden, you and Mom are like, "Hey, what's that? What's that?" And and I look out, and there's you see that dark spot? I'm like, "Oh, there it is." And all of a sudden, next thing you know, we hadn't seen any of those. We were in an area that had a lot of those, and next thing you know, that thing is swimming up and goes all the way up on the beach, and we're backing up, getting out of the way because you can't touch them or bother.
Yeah, I was scared. My kids.
Yeah.
There was a story like not too long ago of a child being taken by a monk seal. Not a monk seal, but a seal. Like, they can be mean.
Well, I know. That's why I wanted dead perfection when I was.
I remembered that the sand, to me, it felt when I stepped my foot on that sand, on that very sand, I was like falling asleep. It felt like the fluff from inside a stuffed animal.
Well, what does that story still say, Dad?
You know, what I think is really cool about this is that, man, God still wanted to be able to make a special moment for you, Jackson. And, you know, there are many things that we've seen along the years that Jackson's either wanted or desired or prayed for. And God comes through and he provides. And sometimes we ask for things that we want, and sometimes we don't like them, and they're like a coconut. We're like, you know, this isn't exactly what I wanted, but God made a special moment for you. And I'll say it for all the listeners, is because God sees you, Jackson, and he loves you, and he wants to do special things for you because you are his son, and you are created by him. And so for Jackson, that showed him that he was seen and that he was loved. But that's even for all of us, is to know that God sees us, even in our coconut stories where we just want something that we won't even necessarily like. But God still wants to be in the details and wants to say that he loves us despite our flaws and mistakes and everything else. And so, so listeners, I want this to be just a encouragement to you, whether it's with your kids and acknowledging the fact that, hey, God met your kid exactly where they're at and being able to point to that and say, God moved in this way, or even for ourselves, being able to say, God, I recognize that you still want to make those special moments with us. Even in the big things, maybe it's a Hawaii trip. I hope it's a Hawaii trip for you, or in the small things with a little bit of a coconut that you may or may not like. But hey, once again, we thank you guys for being on the Only God Stories podcast. This podcast is all set up for you to be able to enjoy how God moves specifically in other people's lives, so it can build your faith, build my faith, our faith, and so we can continue to give glory to God. So, hey, we'll see you guys here in another couple weeks. But we want to thank you again for listening or tuning in. And Jackson, once again, you're going to be my favorite guest. So Jackson, thank you for being on the podcast. And we can't wait to be able to do this again in another couple weeks. All right. All right. God bless. See y'all.
See ya.
Thank you for listening to the Only God Stories podcast. Be sure to follow us on social media as we share more stories like these, and don't forget to check out our website at onlygodstories.org for more information on how you can share how the power of God has moved in your life.